Order of the Home Rule Advisory Group meeting, January 10th, 2018, 10 a.m. here at CC8. We are supposed to have on the phone the California Air Resources Board. Is Chris or someone from ARB on the line?
Yes, we are. This is Johnny Raymond with the California Air Resources Board.
Okay.
I'm representing, I'm in place of Chris Gallenstein.
Great. Thank you, Johnny. And with the Environmental Protection Agency in San Francisco, Amy, are you on the line? Okay, maybe they'll join us soon. Southern California Association of Governments, Roshang or Ping.
Good morning, Dr. Little. This is Rongsheng here.
Okay, Happy New Year. And last but not least, California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance, and also in San Francisco. Why he doesn't walk down the street to EPA is yet to be determined. Bill Quinn? Not there. I can't make fun of him if he's not on the line.
He's walking over there.
He's walking over there. Okay, opening comments, self-introductions. Happy New Year, everyone. And I think we don't have a special topic today, but Phil and I were just talking about how during the conversation about goals and objectives for this year, we should probably try to identify what we want, that extra conversation to be over the course of the next 5 meetings this year, so that we prioritize and stay on track to have interesting conversations here at Home Rule. Other than that, I don't have any other opening comments for everyone in terms of self-introductions. I'm Joe Liu, the governor's appointee on the South Coast SCAQMD Governing Board. And Dr. Fine?
Philip Fine, Deputy Executive Officer, Planning and Rules, AQMD.
Larry Smith, California Companies.
Terry Roberts, American Land Association.
Susan Stark, subbing for Kurt Coleman, who's ill today.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
So clearly everybody has.
I think so, yeah.
I'm Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance.
Nan Harold with OC Waste and Recycling.
David Rothbart, Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts.
Dan McGivney, SoCal Gas.
Ann Spigliola, AQMD.
Philip Crabb with the Legislative Public Affairs and Media Office at AQMD.
Bill Wong with General Counsel's Office.
Great. And has anyone joined us on the phone in the last couple of minutes that we didn't already introduce? No. Okay. Well, we continue not to be able to make fun of Bill Quinn. Yeah, they moved you down there somewhere. I don't know. Do you know where the hearing board
CC3, I saw something.
is? Is that what it is? Okay. Because Councilmember Holden and our former board chair have all walked in. Okay, so that takes care of item number 1. Item number 2 is discussion of the minutes. Any corrections? Addenda?
Well, one minor correction. Ann, on page 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullets.
A lot of bullets.
As we've seen with the clean community, it's clean communities, plural.
Oh, yeah, let's make that change.
And then I noticed on the last page, we discussed on the goals, accomplishments, goals, and objectives. My recollection is that we had some discussion about this advisory group following AB 617, and I don't see it referenced in here. I do, however, see it on our goals and objectives. So if that suffices for the group, I'm happy with that. I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, did it?
And I think David mentioned it during the discussion portion.
I actually tried to put it back on the agenda for this meeting, but then was reminded that we had just talked about it. So obviously, it's going to be a priority.
It is covered
on
the goals and objectives, but not in the minutes. So.
If you'd like to work with that on specific language and getting that in there, feel free to do so. Other than that, I think. Good morning. So any other changes to the minutes? Okay, so with that change, and perhaps if there's any need, I don't think there really is for the 617. It is in there, we are going to pay attention to it. Let's fix that to communities and then consider them adopted. And if anyone has public comment on any item, please feel free to let me know. And we'll, without public comment, move on to item number 3. But I'm not sure we have EPA on the line. Amy,
I'm here.
Oh, you did join
Yeah,
us.
I'm here, Joe.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
And Bill Quinn is also on the line.
Oh.
Sorry for being late.
Hi, Bill. We've been trying to withhold making fun of you because you weren't there to defend yourself. But great.
Was that directed at me or at Bill?
No, at Bill. We were wondering why he doesn't walk over to your office for these calls.
Oh, that would be fun. We should do that sometime.
We
Bill.
should do that,
There
yeah.
you go. See, now I've facilitated some more face-to-face interaction. But we do have San Francisco duly represented here. And Amy, why don't you bring us up to date on EPA and federal activities?
Okay, happy to do so. First off, Happy New Year, everyone. I'm hoping that perhaps for the next Home Rule Advisory Group meeting, I can get to Los Angeles or South Coast in person. But let me just start with some South Coast-related actions. First off, a big thing that we did nationally, but does have implications for California, is for the latter part of December, we completed our notification to governors around the country regarding ozone designation. And so these are the letters that are sent to begin a 120-day process for governors to give us any additional information on their areas that would be designated non-attainment for the 2015 ozone standards. So for California, we concurred with the recommendation for California, and so the South Coast, as you can imagine, will be included as a non-attainment area for the 2015 ozone standards. Additionally, we did at the same time send 120-day letters and completed a third round of designations for the 2010 SO2, National Ambient Air Quality Standard, and we agreed with the state's recommendation, and we're designating all of California as attaining or being unclassifiable for the 2010 1-hour sulfur dioxide standard. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. Just going back to ozone designation, states have until February 28th to submit additional information. Then, as you may have seen, we submitted a letter approving the adequacy of the motor vehicle emission budget for the 2006 PM2.5 serious area plan for the South Coast. And that was signed on December 19th. And the Federal Register notice was published on January 5th, 2018. So what this will allow is transportation planning to move forward with the budgets as they are included in the South Coast SCAQMD. And there are other components of the air quality management plan that we're in the process of reviewing. We're looking particularly closely at the 2006 PM2.5 plan and may take action in the spring, and similarly the plan for ozone taking action sometime before, proposing action sometime before the end of the fiscal year. A few other things, as you are most likely aware, we approved the reasonably available control technology SIP, which included a component for reclaim. And we did that at the end of September. The news I wanted to share with everyone is we did receive no challenge, so that approval stands. And then somewhat related, we know that the district has been making changes to reclaim 2001 and 2002. And we've been meeting with the district over the last few months on reclaim, and we'll continue to do that. And then just two last things. We're working with CARB to withdraw South Coast Rule 1420.1, which is regarding the lead emissions from battery recycling. And then lastly, on the South Coast side of things that I wanted to let folks know that we have been working with the ports of LA and Long Beach and with community members in Southern California to develop a contract to do a case study on the Clean Air Action Plan. So we're going to be taking a look at the lessons learned, insights from the development that can serve as model for other ports and neighborhoods around the country. So we're hoping the case study to be completed in the fall. So perhaps at that time we could come back, and if you want a briefing on that, we'd be happy to do it. So I'm going to pause there before I go into the national action. Joe, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Any questions or comments on any of this? I'd be happy to talk to you about my opinions about the Clean Air Action Plan as you do your case study.
Okay, will do, Joe. We'll make sure you're part of that.
Thank you.
Which plan is it? Is it from?
The one was just approved in November.
Dr. Lu, this is Rongsheng. I have
Yes.
a question.
Go ahead, Ramchang.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned the 2015 ozone area designation. Is there a federal register notice or just a letter?
Yes, no, there is a Federal Register notice. Thank you for asking that. And what I can do is provide that to Anne or whomever else the link to the site. But if you probably Googled ozone designations EPA, and it would get you to the regulations.gov website.
Okay, thank you.
And there, yeah, there, I should have noted there's the comment period is open until February 5th.
And Rongsheng, have you guys completed your move out of the old building and into the new one?
Yes, actually I'm calling from a new office, conference room here.
Ah.
Nice view here. So you're welcome to visit us.
Yeah, you now look down on my office. I was looking right across at yours before, but now you look down on my office. I'll have to come visit at some point. Great, I'm glad that worked out.
So Amy, this is why I just have a question, and I'm obviously aware of the action on ozone, but I mean, what's your best guess that designations for California will actually be effective in terms of the timing?
Well, the one thing I can say is I am assuming, since we've confirmed and concurred with what the state has recommended, that they will go forward and be completed. But you never know that, we have a public comment period and additional data can be presented. There may be some other states where there's some changes from what we've proposed, but in California, I don't think there should be an issue.
So this spring, effective date likely this spring probably.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And that's an issue because of
Well, it just starts the clock for
AQMP preparation and SIP deadlines.
Oh, wow.
Huh?
AQMP starts up again.
It never stops.
It never stops.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But
I know.
then that will establish our compliance attainment deadline, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
20 years from
Yeah.
that
As long as we remain extreme.
Seems like they agree with that assessment.
Okay, yeah, go on to the federal stuff.
Yeah, let me go quickly through that. So, Clean Power Plan repeal, the administration proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan on October 16th, 2017. And in accordance with the executive order, we reviewed the CPP to determine whether it exceeds the bounds of the authority delegated to EPA by Congress. So, as part of this, we're reconsidering the legal interpretation underlying the Clean Power Plan. And there's some other aspects of that. What I wanted to share with the group is it was announced in December that there will be 3 additional public listening sessions, and including one in California, and it will be in San Francisco. So stay tuned for a formal notice of this in the next couple weeks. It will likely be before the end of February, and it will likely be, as I said, in the city of San Francisco. The other 2 sessions that are going to be held for the Clean Power Plan repeal will be in Gillette, Wyoming, and Kansas City, Missouri, at our Region 7 office in the Midwest. And then concurrent with that is the Clean Power Plan replacement that the administration intends to undertake. and the administration issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on December 28th for the state guidelines, and so that will be going through the public process. This advance notice doesn't propose any new regulations, but asks for input. And the comments for that action are due by February 26th. And then with respect to the carbon pollution standards for new electric generating units, they're under review, but we haven't taken any action to propose any revisions, so they are currently effective. On the oil and gas industry side, the administration announced that it's reviewing the 2016 standards for oil and gas. This is the NSPS subpart Quad O or Quad O and OOA, and reconsidering certain aspects of the rule. And I could talk more about that if anyone has a particular interest in actions there. And in 2017, we also granted reconsideration of certain aspects of the 2016 landfill methane rules for new and existing landfills. And there's some interest on the part of this rule in California. So those are pretty important rulemakings that this administration is going to be reviewing, repealing, or revising. On the national air toxic side, the 2014 NADA, National Air Toxics Assessment, is ongoing. Our comprehensive review is ongoing. And we actually are anticipating a public release on our next assessment. And this, again, would be based on 2014 data. And that would be this summer sometime. And then a few things about our budget, and then one last item on an effort that is very engaging a lot of our staff here that's being led by Henry Darwin, and that are some lean activities. But on the budget side, as you're probably all aware, the federal government continues to operate on a continuing resolution. It expires January 19th. So we're in business until then, but meanwhile, funding is beginning to flow. On the monitoring side, we have put forward a request for Section 103 grant allocations, and we're expecting them to be somewhat similar to the FY17 levels. And then on the Diesel Emission Reduction Act side, we expect in the next couple weeks to be announcing the awardees for the last round, so take a look for that. And then at this point, while we continue to operate on the continuing resolution, we are anticipating receiving some funding perhaps in the next 6 months or so. So if you have any questions, I'll pause and turn it back over to you, Joe.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Anyone here at the table?
I just had this. Dan McGivney, so I guess I just had one question on the DARA thing. Was the last statement that you anticipate receiving some funding, was that for DARA or was that for your EPA in general?
It would be for JIRA.
Okay, thank you.
But we won't know until we get a budget.
Right, thank you.
Bill Lamar?
Yeah, Amy, this is Bill Lamar. I believe at our last meeting you mentioned something that EPA was still considering a political appointee for Region 9. Has anything moved on that?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I should have mentioned that at the get-go, Bill. We are the only region currently without a regional administrator. All the other regions have regional administrators in place. And I do not have any information on a political appointee, but meanwhile, Alexis Strauss continues to serve as our acting regional administrator, and Deborah Jordan continues to serve as our acting deputy regional administrator.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the phone have any questions? Any members of the public? Okay, great. Amy, thank you for all of that information. It's quite a bit, a lot to digest. But we really appreciate it, hearing all of that. Certainly the information about the motor vehicle budget is helpful for the folks at SCAG and here at South Coast. And I'm assuming Patty already knows everything about the oil and gas issue, or else she would have asked questions about that. Okay, great. And Johnny Raymond, item number 4, that brings you up with all things California Air Resources Board regulatory activities.
Great. Good morning, Dr. Liu and other members of the Home Rule Advisory Group. One thing I wanted to mention, we won't have a board hearing this month, but it sets the stage for our 50th anniversary celebration at our February board hearing. And so definitely tune into that because we'll have a presentation and identified priorities for the agency coming from our executive office. In addition, during that board hearing, we'll hear, and you saw in your packet, the Phase 2 GHG regulations. And so this is for the medium and heavy duty engines and vehicles. That is, as you may recall, one of our original AB 32 regs that was in the original scoping plan. And so these are just additional updates and refinements to that regulation. In addition, some recent activities I wanted to touch on last year. And so at our December board hearing, our board approved $663 million funding plan, and this is for the clean cars, trucks, and buses. And so these monies come from the GGRF as well as the VW settlement and AQIP funding. In addition, we approved the scoping plan in December, and so this is the main roadmap that how we get to our 2030 emission reduction goals for greenhouse gases, but also mentioned a lot with the ongoing work to roll in 617 and the focus on reducing emissions in communities, which also support our, in addition to greenhouse gas goals, our air quality goals. Also, at the end of December, we updated our pollution mapping tool with toxics. And so previously this tool had criteria pollutants and greenhouse gases. For the first time, it includes toxics. And so a lot of our staff struggled with how you display this. And so right now, online, you can zoom into an individual facility and see potency weighted pounds that are emitted for single facilities, or you can sort it for groups of facilities, industrial sectors, or geographic areas. I definitely recommend you checking out this tool with this updated information. Also, we added additional layers. Cal virus screen is on there, as well as you can sort for political districts, Senate, and Assembly information. That concludes my update. I'll open it up for any questions that the group may have.
Great. Any questions for Johnny?
I got one.
David, go ahead.
A question regarding the mapping tool. Is there a process if there's anything that's inconsistent with what you reported to a local district to get that updated? My staff has indicated to me they've seen some discrepancies and they didn't quite know how to get that corrected. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, our staff are working directly with the inventory staff at each of the districts that do the CEDAR submittals. And so my contact here is David Edwards. I don't have his number handy, but I can follow up with that and provide that to you. He's spearheading the whole updating of the inventory. That really is the cornerstone of the AB 197 effort, and it's really expanded with the new directives for 617.
I'm just curious.
You can find his contact information.
Right, and it's just more of a question of the process, because facilities submit to the local air district that I assume then upload it to CARB. So
If you let us know what the discrepancy is, I think we could do a little homework and see if we could figure out what happened. If you go at it from both ends, I think you're going to be more successful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So you, Phil, or someone else?
Ian.
Okay.
Ian, wow. He has a lot of responsibility, doesn't he?
It's got 14 new positions.
So Dr. Liu, this is Bill Quinn, and I just wanted to say that we've been working quite closely with Dave on the mapping tool, and just really want to congratulate him and his team because, quite frankly, when this first came out as a result of AB 197, it was pretty rough. There were a lot of mistakes that our members had found in the reporting and criteria of pollutants in particular. And over the year and gearing up for this introduction of toxics, we've seen great improvement. And Dave is very, very willing to help any errors. I have his number. It's 916-323-4887. And like I said, we've had very, very good relationship working with him and getting problems fixed.
Any other?
That's great. Thanks for that, Bill.
Any other comments? I would add to the list of accomplishments by the Air Resources Board, the certification of the Cummins Westport 12-liter natural gas engine with 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour for those people of NOx, for those people who care about those things. And anyone who cares about smog in Los Angeles should care about those things. So congratulations on getting that done. It should keep, I would imagine, keep Cummins Westport on their production schedule. They're going to, they plan on being in full engine production in February, shipping them out in March, April, and the truck manufacturer said they'd have them available in May, June. So that's I mean, between the $663 million, which includes a lot of money for heavy-duty vehicles, the certification of this engine, we actually could be on a pathway to getting very significant NOx emission reductions, we hope, right? We, of course, need another $1 billion a year in the following 14 years to really get there, but it's a really important development.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other things on the California Air Resources Board? Any members of the public anywhere? None? Okay, great. Thank you, Johnny. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Philip Crabb on legislative update.
Yes. Good morning, everyone.
We're all out of
Happy New Year.
session, right? What kind
They
of
are.
update could you have?
Well, federal government's still there.
Federal government's still there.
And all the working, getting ready for the new state year. So, there was a legislative committee meeting held on December 8th. And basically our federal consultants they provided written reports, which are in the December packet, which is available on the table there, and provided some verbal updates at the meeting as well. And the focus there was, at the time, talking about the continuing budget resolution that at the time wasn't going to be going through December 22nd. As they mentioned, it's going to be going through January 19th at this point, and we'll see how they do in meeting that deadline. May have to do a little extension on top of that. And also, it was reported that tax reform was on its way to completion, and we all know that that's well done and good. So, there was also discussion about the US EPA proposal to repeal provisions that apply the heavy-duty truck Phase 2 emission standards to the glider industry. And a public hearing was held to receive public comment on that issue, and where AQMD staff, including our executive officer, Wayne Nastry, participated and testified, and it was noted that an estimated 60 or other individuals or groups also testified, mostly in opposition to the EPA proposal, mostly due to the negative impact on emissions that proposal would have. Additionally, AQMD staff met with the new US EPA Assistant Administrator for Air and Radiation, Bill Wareham, in Washington. Also, it was mentioned that Susan Bodine was just recently confirmed by the US Senate as the US EPA's Assistant Administrator for Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. Also, US EPA on November 30th issued a final rule on the renewable fuel standard, which sets the volume requirements for ethanol, biofuel, biodiesel, and much of those that should be blended into, or how much of those should be blended into the fuel supply. This issue always draws strong interest because it's basically pitting the farm states against the oil states. Through the rulemaking, the US EPA kind of split the difference. So in the end, neither side appeared fully happy with the compromise result, but that's pretty common in compromises. Also, there was an update relating to EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt's testimony before the U.S. House and Energy Commerce Committee. It was reported that, of course, our two California representatives were raising questions regarding issues of interest to AQMD, and it was noted that Administrator Pruitt did not commit to maintaining the California waiver, and when asked about states' rights, he commented that one state cannot dictate to the rest of the country, but still to be determined. It was also reported that the U.S. House is preparing a $4.4 billion wildfire relief package for Northern California. So it's very possible that there may be a future effort to help Southern California on the same issue through similar funding. And since air pollution is such a big consequence of wildfires, AQMD will be looking for opportunities to help address air quality issues within the South Coast region in that respect. On the state side, again, there's written reports and some verbal updates were given at the meeting. And it was stated that the legislature, of course, just returned from recess on January 3rd, and that former Speaker of the Assembly and now Senator Toni Atkins will be the next President Pro Tem of the state Senate. It was noted that she will be the first female Pro Tem in the state's history. And also was recently determined that Senator Atkins will be sworn in on March 21st.
Oh, that's news.
Yeah. Consequently, some changes in the Senate leadership team and in committees is expected, but many of the committee chairs will likely stay the same. The expectation is that everything will start shifting over to Senator Atkins due to current Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon's focus on running for U.S. Senate. Finally, it was reported that the ongoing conversation about sexual harassment would likely continue for the next year or so, and that it will continue to be a hot topic at the forefront of the legislature. As you may have obviously heard, Assembly members Raul Bocanegra and Matt DeBobne have already resigned. Senator Tony Mendoza has taken a leave of absence pending an investigation. So that has already started to create vacant seats and hurt two-thirds majorities, things like that. Also, another note is Assemblymember Sebastian Billy Thomas also resigned, and he cited health concerns. Finally, the only action item taken up at Legislative Committee in December was the recommended 2018 state and federal legislative goals and objectives. It was stated that both the state and federal legislative goals and objectives focus on a number of things, including seeking increased funding sources for clean air programs that protect public health and ensure attainment of state and federal air quality standards, particularly incentive programs that support the 2016 AQMP. Also working to ensure that the state and federal governments do their fair share to reduce air pollution by producing legislative funding and regulatory support to AQMD to implement the AQMP and to meet national air quality standards by the upcoming deadlines. Also supporting policies and funding that promote the development and deployment of zero and near zero emission infrastructure, equipment, and vehicles. Also protecting and ensuring adequate AQMD authority for implementing the governing board's clean air policies and programs as required by federal and state law and the AQMP. Just a couple more, supporting legislation, policies, and administrative actions that encourage job retention and creation and promote economic growth while working towards attainment of clean air standards. And finally, supporting legislation and funding to promote environmental justice initiatives that reduce localized health risks from criteria pollutant and toxic air emissions, and develop and expand access to clean air technology that directly benefits disproportionately impacted communities. In particular, this includes securing the necessary resources to fully implement local air districts' new responsibilities created by AB 617. Overall, the Legislative Committee did adopt staff's recommended position to approve this item. And like I didn't state yet, but that the next committee meeting is going to be this Friday for the Legislative Committee, so not able to report on what happened, but it'll be happening in a couple of days, and I'll, of course, report on that next meeting. And there's a January agenda available here on the table as well, if you want to see the preview. And that's my report.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions on that? I think Kevin De Leon will also be busy trying to revise California tax law to allow all of our taxes to be considered charitable contributions.
Joe?
Yes.
This is BQ. So I'm, working on my office. You could multitask here. And the governor just released his budget about a half hour ago, his proposed budget. And I'm just skimming through the summary, and I think that's most interesting probably to a lot of folks in the room. It's states that he will make his recommendations for the use of GGRF funding in his State of the State address later in January.
Interesting. Well, I hope that he sends us a lot of money to support the staff that we're going to be hiring.
Exactly.
At minimum, and also maybe $1 billion in mobile source emission reduction money would be helpful too, with very few strings and allow us to use our discretion on where it's best spent. Okay, well that's good to hear. Anybody have any other comments or questions on that legislative update? Where'd you get that information about Senator Atkins becoming?
Our consultants just let us know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. Okay, great. Any comments from members of the public? We're moving right through. Item number 6, update on litigation items and related EPA activities from Bill Wong.
Thank you, Dr. Liu, and Happy New Year to everyone. Just a few updates to the litigation status report I filed with this committee. In the first case, actually, which is a challenge to the spending of our AB 1318 funds for the CV link, it indicates that we will file tomorrow. We have filed tomorrow, and a hearing is going to be held this Friday on that tomorrow. In addition, for case number 10, which is the challenge to our reclaim lawsuit, the challenge to our reclaim program that we adopted in December 2015, the court essentially found that there was no evidence of a board consideration of the changes made in the rule, and I understand that the board has approved taking an appeal on that decision. And finally, for case number 12, this is the case against Exide. Apparently, there was going to be a motion on Exide's motion to discharge its penalties obligations in bankruptcy court, but that hearing has been continued to January 31st, 2018. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from anyone at the table, on the phone? Members of the public? Looks like we're keeping the attorneys busy. Anyone else planning on suing us? Okay.
So early in the year.
Maybe next month.
Thanks, Patty. We look forward to it. All right, then item number 7 are the subcommittee reports. We're going to get out of here before we have any chance to have the lunch that I'm sure Ann has ordered for us. Yeah.
Speak slowly.
No, I'm just thinking that maybe, I mean, if they've already committed to making it and all that, maybe if they could bring it down early.
I can walk over there and ask.
Okay, why don't you do that? Because we're almost done here. So we will be talking about the goals and objectives. Maybe that'll take an hour. Like a conversation about reclaim on Friday. Which really should have taken about 30 seconds. But okay, subcommittee reports, freight sustainability. You're tasked with that.
Yep. So you already mentioned, Joe, the Cummins 12-liter engine.
Oh, sorry to take that away from you.
One of my 2 items. So in addition to meeting the O2 standard, it was actually certified down at .01.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, so that was very good. And I'm not an expert at how mobile sources are regulated. I know they're differently than stationary. They often are in like categories and averages and all kinds of stuff. But I don't know, is there an opportunity there once some of these are being deployed to get that difference between O2 and O1, a credit for that or something?
There's ways.
It's twice as good.
They have the optional standards at CARB, right?
That's a .02, isn't it?
Well, now it's a .02. They haven't set one in .01, but I guess they
could
at some point, and that would obviously qualify. There's still some questions of how you would do that with EPA, because generally you assume up to the regulatory level, not the certified level.
Okay. Because reality doesn't mean anything.
Right. But we've talked in the past about how you might change that procedure. So.
Okay, well, worth a shot, I guess. The other item is CARB has released their proposal for the Innovative Clean Transit Rule. It has, I'll just note a couple items in here that it contains. So it has a phased purchase fleet, I'll call it fleet purchasing, for zero emission vehicles, starting in, you have to have 25% by 2020.
That's for buses or for?
You know what, I'm getting notes from someone else. I
think
it might be.
It might be for buses.
I know there's some of the bus stuff is a little different from the regular stuff, but so basically it goes 25% 2020, 50, 23, 75% in 26, and 100% by 29.
It's got to be buses.
It might be buses. It contains some
Tesla stock would have gone up some more.
Yeah, statement that if for the buses, near zero buses, it's if they're available. So I mean, I think some buses are already available, right?
Sure.
Yeah. It has a requirement for large transit fleets to purchase renewable fuels when contracts are renewed. One thing it doesn't do, and it's not accounting for greenhouse gas benefits from using renewable fuels like renewable gas or diesel. I guess the reason or something was because it's in the LCFS, but there's still surplus emissions that could be credited that really aren't captured, I guess. So I'm sure.
Okay, great.
I'm sure some folks will be working on that. If there's early purchases of zero emission buses, they can get credits for future year purchase requirements. And there's a performance-based compliance is an option, but there isn't really a metric yet for equivalency. So that'll be an ongoing item, I guess. Anyway, that's all I have for today.
Okay. Well, Port of Los Angeles State of the Port is tomorrow morning, and then Port of Long Beach is coming up after that. I forget, was it 23rd, 19th, I think. And what else on the freight front? There was something else. Oh, we certainly expect reports back from South Coast staff in March on what they're proposing to do on the facility-based measure side of things, and also at the California Air Resources Board in March on facility-based measures.
We have working groups next week, and we'll become in a mobile source committee in February.
Okay. So it's going to be a busy year on the freight front. All right. Bill Lamar on small business considerations.
I took note of the fact that my accomplishments that I submitted last year, the one that had been inadvertently left off is now included. That starts my new year off right. We didn't do much outreach since our last meeting, except for the participating in the 1469 working group. Last year, I was approached by the chairman's office at the Air Resources Board about my interest in serving on their Small Business Opportunities Advisory Panel. And I was encouraged to submit the necessary paperwork. I did. I got vetted, and I was notified last week that I had been approved as an advisor to the panel. The way I understand it, there are 11 members on the panel from industry leaders from across the state in manufacturing, farming, agriculture, waste and recycling, trucking, and so on. And so I guess I'm not sure how many other advisors participate in this.
How often do they meet?
You know, I think they meet maybe quarterly, and so all I really can say now is that my application was accepted, and that's going to be another gig for me. So that's my report.
Okay. I think that the item that was approved, I I think it was on a consent calendar last Friday to release money from the mitigation funds, various mitigation funds to up to, was it $60 million, right? A lot of that, I think, can help small businesses. So maybe there's a way to make sure that your members and other small businesses get a copy of the RFP that's going out, right? Because that's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
Requests for proposals to find ways to get those emission reductions. But it's going to be incentive money. There's significant money being spent from the deep coffers of South Coast AQMD. Do our part to pitch in on this, but it's pretty much all stationary source.
It's
right?
open to mobile.
Some mobile.
But just because if there's good projects out there, we want to see them, but they could always either be directed into some of our typical mobile source programs, but there's also some mobile projects that don't fall under Carl Moyer or 1B. So we want to look at that, but the emphasis is to try to get started on like what we've talked about for years as a program for stationary source incentives.
And there's from different pots of money are different requirements that have to be met, but I did see
emission reductions.
That's the basic thing is you got to get emission reductions. Beyond that, there's some flexibilities.
Yeah, well, above and beyond the regulations, we hope, right?
Yeah, above and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to have a copy of that.
Yeah, it was in the board package.
I forget what item it was. Was it item 2?
It was early 2 or 3.
Mark,
something like that.
3, I mean, was it item 2 on the board package last Friday? I think it was item 2.
I'll look for it.
Yeah, look for it.
It's going to go up on our website this week.
Okay. Susan, sitting in for Kurt, did he give you anything on environmental justice?
He didn't give me anything, but I would imagine AB 617 implementation, the choosing of locations for community monitoring and also for the emission reduction plans will be a big activity, and I'm sure Bill is and staff are at their eyeballs and planning for that.
Yeah.
So I could just say a couple words on where we are. Kind of the first big task for us is community ID, right? And I think we convinced CARB that that the districts are better set up to do that because we've been working with the communities.
How the law says.
Well, they will still make the final decision, but there's going to be this nomination process by which we will submit a report with what we think would be the best priorities and choices. So we are, right now working internally on some of the technical work of how you might define communities or name communities, and then also some of the kind of metrics and ranking criteria you might look at. In parallel to that, we're working on kind of an outreach plan because we understand there's going to be a dozen or more meetings throughout the district to get input on which communities and which criteria, and how you draw lines around communities, if you do at all. And so that's going to be a major effort in the next 2 to 3 months because we have to get our schedule to get something to CARB by probably August timeframe. And then they want some preliminary stuff by April, May. So we're really kicking that off. That's our first task. There's a million other AB 617 tasks, but that's the most pressing one.
And there was also money to help the community-based organizations participate in that outreach process.
Yeah.
So you might need to help facilitate that too. Bill and then Dan.
Yeah, I'm curious I've always been curious about communities. Communities are different in San Joaquin Valley or Imperial Valley than they are here. But is your staff looking at census tract data like you typically do in Mates? Or are you looking at political boundaries?
Well, it's a variety of things and they don't all line up, right? So you have, Callan virus screen, which does go down to census tract level. You have our kind of EJ data and definitions we've used, which are grid-based. Mm-hmm. We have our MATES modeling, which is also grid-based. We have, so the boundaries are going to have to, we'll have to use statistical methods to kind of to figure that stuff out. I think the harder thing, and there's a wide variety of metrics that could be used that we're working on. I think the harder thing is like, you can't just say, like, how do you define a community? When you say West Long Beach, is it West Long Beach and Wilmington, or is it just West Long Beach? And is it really just West Long Beach, or is it a little bit east of the 710? And every community is going to have ideas about that. So I think our first task is, kind of roughly defining areas and getting feedback on whether you need boundaries, or maybe you don't need boundaries. It's really focused on the facilities or the roadways in that area, so you don't really have to draw a line. You just know which facilities you need to focus on. So there's a lot of different moving parts, but it needs to go through that public process and get that feedback.
And is that going, are you just going to announce that, or is that going to be open for comment?
I think it's definitely open for comment. We have to, when we go out to the community, we have to go out with something. So we're going to go out with really very preliminary assessments and things. But the idea is to take feedback on all those factors. How do you weight the factors? Should there be other factors? And then prioritization and all those things. So part of what we haven't really decided yet on this outreach plan is definitely going to be community meetings. Do we use EJAG as a sounding board, and how frequently? Do we use this group as a sounding board? Like, we need to figure out how all the committees and stuff fit together. So, thank you.
Dan, David.
No, if I heard you when you first started discussion, the district's looking at, I guess, nominating certain areas as EJ communities or communities to be covered under the initial round of the thing.
Well, and perhaps nominating a whole long list of communities with prioritization that would be worked through over the years, something like that.
And then obviously there's the part of AB 617 that talks about coming up with criteria, and you kind of discussed looking at all these different things. So is this a twofold thing? I mean, are you looking at identifying communities, and proposing them obviously for people to comment on, but that you think are pretty clear, and then coming up with criteria, or are you coming up with criteria and then hoping these match, or I guess, how's that work, I guess?
Doing technical work to see the different criteria that would make sense and how we're going to get that data and do those calculations and rank or score or however that's going to happen, and then see where that leaves us. But there's obviously a kind of a subjective component to this as well, so we need to, get out there with that as well.
And then then this goes to CARB.
Yeah.
And if everybody else in the state's doing their thing, are they using different criteria, I guess that's
Try to make sure that different districts can use different criteria and different weighting, because not all districts have the same data sets.
Okay.
And there may be some districts that don't
have the same priorities.
And some districts may not do the nomination process, and it's going to be up to CARB on their own to come up with something. So,
and they'd be coming up with their criteria, which I think they discussed early on. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's unreasonable to expect that the entire state would have exactly the same criteria or the same priorities, especially given the different data sets that exist that different districts have developed, right?
Thank you.
We're the only one that does MAIDs.
As an extension of that discussion, when it gets to CARB, do you see sort of a competition between air districts? That you'd have, South Coast would come in and say, hey, we really, really think this community needs to be looked at, and then you have a small pot of money, and then are you going to be in competition with other air districts that may have their own list of communities they feel strongly about?
So that's active discussion at CAPCO, and you'd be surprised that, there's some medium to small districts that are like, we're not ready, don't give us a community just yet. What their community members think about that is a different story. So there's been a lot of discussion, but you don't know the final answer yet, but in the budgeting process that went through the legislature, there's been just some really rough assumptions made based on population and other things about where the high first round or second year priorities are going to be, and then I think some of the likely to be in the large districts.
But you see, if you felt strongly about your opinion, what you're requesting, would you be an advocate for the community going in, or would it be up to the community to go and explain that directly to CARB?
I think that's going to happen, because I don't think I'm good enough to get 100% consensus on our priorities in South Coast and get everyone 100% behind it when we go to CARB. There's going to be some communities that feel like they're higher priority, and they'll have their say with us and our board, because we'll take our report to our board, and if they don't agree with our board recommendations.
CARB's creating an advisory
Right.
group.
They can
It's
go
on
to
the
CARB.
list.
Yeah, and they can go to CARB
Also
directly.
community members.
And there's also a process they're laying out that a community can nominate themselves. They don't have to wait for a district to do it. Although we're encouraging communities that are interested to come to us and we'll integrate them into our process.
Okay, very interesting. Yes, it's going to be bumpy. Susan?
I was going to ask a follow-up. You had mentioned identifying facilities in communities and kind of, I think, hinging the selection process there. But there's also the mobile source emissions, right? So you did say roadways, but rail,
Yeah,
air, all
broad
of that.
definition of facilities are you down to.
Because that will also be
mobile sources.
challenging, right, to fold in to selection.
Yeah, the MATES covers it. You know, some of our metrics are going to be more stationary source emission related, and then other databases we have include mobile source emissions, so we'll have to see how that plays together.
Well, okay, and remind me, does MATES differentiate between stationary and mobile, or is it more, here's the, the risk, the concentration?
The results can do that.
Okay.
So you obviously see in our MATES cities, we say this percentage from diesel, this percentage from mobile. Looking down, we don't have it necessarily at the 2 kilometer grid level.
Right, or that this is from rail, this is from
And
freeways.
we can do
this
that,
is
and
from-
we can
okay.
actually do it at the 2 kilometer grid level.
Oh,
It's just
yes.
too much data to present publicly in a report.
Okay.
But we have that data deep in our databases, so we will start using some of that.
Okay, thank you.
And it's on the emission side, we can do it on the emissions within the grid cell, but we can also do it on the exposure within the grid cell, which includes emissions that came from outside the grid cell.
Okay, Bill and then Patty.
I think that's where we got all that information about risk at freeway on-ramps and off-ramps and everything like that several weeks ago, too, or whatever it was.
I thought those were special near highway monitors that
We did some of
EPA
that last
required.
time, yeah.
Philip, as I think I understand it, there is a AQMP that has to be developed for some of these communities that call for emission reduction, not just air monitoring, but emission
It's a
reduction.
community emission reduction plan,
Community emission reduction plan,
which
okay.
may
A mini.
look like a mini AQMP, but again, the state has some guidance to develop about how these things are put together. Again, we will be actively giving our opinion on what they should look like. I view them as mini AQMPs in a way, but I don't know what the final answer is on that.
And do those have to be in place before anything goes forward? or-
No, those are due, let me get the dates wrong, I believe the end of 2019 is the first set.
I can't remember. There's a bunch of different deadlines.
I think it's the end of
Sounds about right.
2019.
So the plan is to go forward with this before there's any plan, then, or any approved plan?
No, the first set is, so there's a couple. So the first task is to identify communities through us and CARB. Then those communities will either need monitoring, they will need a community emission reduction plan, or they'll need both, depending on how you want to do it. And then we will then either do monitoring in parallel or wait for monitoring to do a plan or just do a plan. There's some communities who don't want any more monitoring. They just want emission reductions. Or there's already been monitoring. So communities, once they're ID'd, will be on these different tracks. There's some deadlines for that. And then, but the one thing I will mention is that the legislature didn't wait. They gave us the state $250 million for right now to get mobile source emission reductions. Well, include cars, even more than 250 million, 663. Some of that in the legislative language is.
That's not even including the VW settlement.
Right. So some of that in the legislative language reference 617 communities, but there are no 617 communities yet. So there has been work with CARB, what we're calling no regrets communities, which is defining some areas that we can spend this money now and don't have, before we go through the 1 or 2 year process of community ID, if we know the communities that need this and, we need to spend the money or we're not gonna get any more. So CARB has, I think there's some level of agreement that this first round of funding can go to areas around the ports, can go to areas on the freight corridors, can go to EJ communities that, it's to show the successes. And then once we start defining communities a little better, then subsequent funds can be directed appropriately.
There's no sunset to 617, so it's going to be an ongoing process.
Because I have a couple more questions. I've heard this, I've heard you and others mention we need to spend this money. Is there a sunset on this money?
Yes, right? Has to be spent or encumbered by June 30th, 2019.
Which is longer than we want because you just heard the governor just released his budget.
Another round of money coming.
And it's going to be hard to make a case for another 250 million statewide or whatever it is if you're still sitting on 249 million waiting for some other shoe to drop. So
It's essentially the one-time allocation
Yeah.
for that year. And then you have a certain amount of time to spend it, and then we go into the next year, and there's a whole different calculation for new funding.
And then my
And
last
there's
question.
separate funding that helped us hire staff for this year.
Right. And then my last question, I promised I'll give the floor to Patty. If you and a community elects to go forward with this emission reduction plan, on what basis is that decision going to be made? Is that with a number of stationary sources or facilities within that community or within those boundaries? And do you know that those in fact are sources of emissions other than your annual emissions reports? By your notices of violations, emission-related NOVs, or how is that decision going to be made? I'm just curious.
decision on whether there'll be a plan or what the plan's going to include.
Well, not so much whether there's going to be a plan or what it's going to include, but you mentioned a little earlier to move forward, and I'm assuming when you said move forward with emission reductions rules and timelines and everything else that goes with rulemaking.
No, what we're moving forward with quickly is community ID.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
How do we prioritize communities based on the data that we have and we know?
Right.
And then, once they are prioritized and they are selected for a certain year, then there's going to be either monitoring or planning process or both. As you know, in the AQMP, once we start that planning process, we dig into the data even deeper because we can focus. So if that community was ranked high based on AER data sets or AB 2588 data sets or MATES data sets, and then we dig in to that, that neighborhood and see that maybe those emissions were overestimated or maybe they're underestimated. The plan will be, the plan content will be based on a deeper dive into that area. What is the community concerned about? Where would they like to see emission reductions if they're possible and feasible and all those things? Can we bring incentives in and state money in? And then the plan will be designed to achieve emission reductions in that community based on that deeper dive.
So then what I'm hearing is that the decision, and hopefully entirely, but certainly in large part, the decision to move forward is going to be based on scientific data, not public reaction.
Depends what
Somebody
decision
comes in with
decision.
a list of signatures and say, we've got 10,000 signatures, we want you to stop here.
Well, there's lots of decisions to be made. One is community ID, one is, do we monitor, do we do a plan, and then how do we monitor, how do we do a plan, what's in the plan, who approves a plan? It'll all go through our governing board. All of it will go through the governing board. It's not going to be staff level making these decisions.
And there's also going to be guidance from ARB on what should be in the plans.
So it's but it'll all be public, open process. All the small businesses in these communities are going to be well aware of what's going on and have input. And, I mean, the idea is it could lead to rulemaking. If we find things like we found in Paramount, that's leading to rulemaking. But it could lead to enforcement, it could lead to directing incentives in the right place. And mobile sources are explicitly a part of that.
Or voluntary measures, whatever, yeah. Okay, Patty?
Thank you. Quick question. You mentioned the CARB Advisory Board. Do we have an update on it, or is like the selection process, when they'll start and who's on it? And is it...
I think they have a preliminary list, but I don't know if it's been made public.
Yeah, I don't know whether they made it public yet. I've seen
a preliminary list.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Liu?
Yeah.
We've actually, we're on the, Janet is on the committee, and we've actually sent that out to our membership, so I think it is public.
Oh, okay.
Wayne Nastry's on it, as well as other Air District 8 APCOs. So I would be happy to send that to you if I could choose to see it.
Okay. Maybe send it to Ann, she can circulate it with everyone.
Okay, great.
You have any other questions, Patty?
No.
Veronica Edie's in charge of putting that together.
Okay. Dan?
I lost mine already, so go on.
Larry?
Dan gave up already?
Well, he's already talked once. So.
Yeah, twice, I think.
I just want to do my part to make sure we extend this meeting into lunch, so
Okay.
I'm back on the $250 million, kind of a one-time funding that
Yes.
we discussed earlier. And then you mentioned that, you know, we need that money because we need to hire staff, and I'm curious what happens if that's a part of it.
Different money for
Okay,
staff.
so money is set aside specifically for staff and the.
Well, there was additional money for AB 617 implementation that went through a different bill that got us some money that we used to buy equipment and hire staff.
Okay. Of course, the concern is if you don't expand the discussion, that if it's one-time money, you hire staff, money dries up and it happens. I just want
That
a
question I
clarification
asked the
on
staff, and they're hopeful that they can make a very convincing case to the legislature and governor that we're spending the money properly, and that we need more of it, and that we will continue to spend it properly.
Okay.
And we will get more one-time money.
Which means it's multiple time money. Okay, I get
Yeah,
it.
but even, Michael Kelly left us, so he wasn't there to explain. Even if that doesn't happen, which we don't expect it not to happen, we expect to get the money, it's not coming out of GGRF, it's coming out of the Air Pollution Control Fund, which is a little more stable and gets less scrutiny. But let's just say it gets cut off, and there are people in the legislature who have talked about cutting us off. Just through attrition, we have 30 to 40 retirements a year. We only ask for 40 positions or so, 45. So just through attrition and not filling positions, we would be able to readjust back down to a staffing rate if we had to, at a different staffing level. So
I think you know how important that component is in negotiating for staff money. So
yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. That clears that for me. Thank you.
I remembered my question.
Oh, great.
Oh, you're back.
Go back to the community emission reduction plans. So you talked about looking at that community once it's identified it needs a plan, let's say, or whatever, monitoring, and you're going to do a deep dive and stuff. But it seems to me that you could find out that some of the emissions that are pertinent to that community come from outside the community. You know, so is that something that, I mean, that you consider you might have to regulate a source or sources that are outside of the community to accomplish it?
Possibly. Putting the cart before the car, I guess, because we don't know exactly what their guidance is going to look like in those areas. But I anticipate that when you go into a community and talk about what they really want is not emission reductions, they want exposure reductions, right? And that's what people care about. They want to be exposed to less air pollution. And anything you're doing to do that, whether it's in or outside that community, should be whatever's the most cost-effective way to do it. You should be able to consider that, which is why drawing lines around a community and saying you are only eligible for funding if you fall within this red line, or you're only part of this plan if you fall within the red line, that's not how I would like to approach it, but we need to see how that plays out.
Right, and there may even be AQMP measures already that address the sources outside of the community, I would think, or anyway. Okay.
That's when I say it's, I don't want to take too much time, because the food came early. When I say it's like an AQMP, it's the same thing, ideas like what is the exposure now? What is it going to be, because there's already rules and regulations in place that are going to achieve reductions in the future, and then what could be done to improve it even further.
Try to find that delta.
Yeah.
Okay. Does this conclude the conversation about environmental justice, which Susan said she had nothing to talk about?
My fault.
No, it's good. Good conversation. If it does, then David, you're up on climate change activities.
Real quick addition to the news, the scoping plan was approved in December by CARB, just that each measure that's included in the scoping plans going to be developed through individual public processes. So if there's any measure that anyone's interested in, there's going to be a process regarding those measures. That's all I have.
Okay. All right, any questions or comments on any of the subcommittee status report updates? That's great, though. We had a good conversation about that. Any members of the public, anybody else? Hearing none, we got a report to and from Stationary Source Committee, Dr. Fine.
Yeah, so preliminary agenda to be released tomorrow, I believe, for Stationary Source which is next Friday, 19th. A new member of the Home Rule Advisory Group is Dr. Clark Parker, and that'll be on the agenda to approve. There will be...
It's a little odd that we have to go through a process for that, but yes.
I know, so we're still working on that process.
Philip, is he replacing Sheila Keel?
No,
I think it's a replacement.
no. He became vice chair. He's interested in getting involved in more things. So he said he's going to come visit us. So that's great.
I hope that doesn't make a quorum of one or two. Of the board. Anyway, so then there's a presentation on some new BACT guidelines. We're making some amendments to the BACT guidelines. Al will talk about that. And then a series of rules. Rule 1111, giving an update of where we are with that. That's the central furnaces. And also a contracted start a rebate program for compliant furnaces, early compliance for furnaces. And then the rule, and then two rules that are largely administrative that help enforcement issues that have come up recently. A new Rule 120 and an amended Rule 408. And we'll talk about that. We have a meeting tomorrow on that, public consultation meeting. And then another update yet again on TBAC, because we did finalize our cancer potency factor. So we'll be looking for feedback from the committee on a way forward on that. That's it.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that update? Stationary Source Committee issues?
I have that question on behalf of Kurt. What was the decision on TDAC? He probably knows, but so I can.
I think
they adopted the proposed.
They adopted it, but I thought it was lower just a bit, right? It's a little bit lower.
Yeah, so they didn't come to the conclusion that it's toxic, but they made some minor modifications and changed the slope a little bit, the potency slope.
I think Mark actually listened to the hearing because that's the kind of guy he is.
Like a 20, net effect was like a 20-30% difference or something, right?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
Well, staff will figure it out before the Stationary Source Committee meeting, and then we'll hear it.
We figured it out, I just don't know.
Yeah, a lot of details to keep up. Okay, so if there are not any other comments from any members of the public or any members of the committee, then we'll move on to agenda item number 9. This is our 2017 accomplishments and our 2018 goals and objectives, which are in the package. And then we would also like to add to that kind of which priorities in terms of goals and objectives that we will talk about at future meetings. So I'm pretty sure I've reviewed these. I'm just wondering what anyone else has with regard to the goals and objectives, and we've heard from Bill that we've ironed out the accomplishments. All right. It's more of a factual document of what we did. So goals and objectives have to do with climate, environmental justice, race, sustainability, and small business considerations. this is pretty much what we did last time with a few edits. Update the year and taking off the consensus building until further need. And then throwing in 617 implementation on EJ.
Excuse me, is Jane still a member of Home Rule?
Jane took a new job.
Took a new job. She's where? Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Oh.
She has left us air people for water.
Okay.
She's now
A
a
sin that
regulator.
is seldom forgiven.
Yes, sir.
That does mean we probably have a vacancy. I don't know how many vacancies we have at Home Rule now, but we should probably consider if there are people to fill Jane's slot.
I believe someone at Eastern had an interest.
Right, did we, can't remember. You don't know?
I don't remember the name offhand, but
Okay.
we never received anything like a formal request, so.
Okay.
I could prompt them.
Can you follow up on that? Be in touch with Ann and see.
They were already told that they need to do that.
Oh, okay,
I think Ann did that.
Yes, they
Oh.
were advised of that.
all right, all right. And then we should just take a look at the overall committee and see what the gaps there are. And for some of these folks who never show up, we might want to thank them for their service. Okay, so are there any changes to these goals and objectives or the accomplishments? Anyone want to suggest? Because if not, we'll just consider them final, and then we'll talk about the topics that we'd like to hit on our meetings. No? Looks good?
You mean as far as our goals and objectives?
Yeah. I think they look, pretty standard. We've gotten into a review. Yeah, into a kind of a groove here with not needing to amend them a lot in the following years.
I think between the goals and objectives and the charter or the mission
Yeah.
statement of the group, I think we are covered, barring some unforeseen happening here mid-year or something like that.
Yeah, and I think 617 is one of the things that certainly raises issue of home rule type issues. I mean, there's some lack of clarity as to what ARB's role is going to be and what South Coast role is going to be. And, we haven't even talked about whether other agencies on a more local level will be engaged. Certainly, LA County Public Health has been much more engaged in a lot of issues recently, and I wouldn't be surprised if they want to be a big part of 617 implementation. So we should figure out when a good time is to talk about that. So I think that should be one of the topics for sure.
I have a couple ideas for that. One is, there's going to be so much going on, I wouldn't object to it be a standing item. Number two, it's pretty broad, so even if it is a standing item or not, to focus on a particular aspect of it at this meeting rather than try to cover the whole thing is probably going to be more fruitful. There's going to be some issues coming up with the emissions reporting requirements at the state and local level that this group should probably hear. And then we talked about some of the other requirements today.
Okay.
And some of the funding pieces. So, I could probably provide like a very general update. If you want to do it as part of the EJ committee, that's fine, or a separate item. But then if we were going to dive in, I would probably pick off one topic and dive in. Right?
Yeah. I think until it gets to the point where we're not having interesting conversations about it, let's just keep it as a standing item, right? Certainly a lot of conversation today, and emissions reporting is certainly an issue for everyone at the table. Be interesting to have a talk about that. Susan, yeah.
Just talking about emission reporting, we thought everyone would have to do what we're doing here, that this is the gold standard. Is that not necessarily true?
We have made that case, but there's kind of like two overarching questions about legislation and how CARB is being implemented. One is, our facility is going to report to us and report to CARB the same data? Or in the second issue, or is it
different data?
Different data. We are making the case that, again, we are, quote, the gold standard, and that the data, it should be serial reporting, and send it to us, we'll forward it on, which we do now.
Yeah.
I don't know, the interpretation, CARB hasn't finalized their interpretation, but they aren't 100% on board with that yet. And then it does say uniform system, but does that mean uniform emission factors, uniform protocols, and things like that?
Well, we can get into this when we have it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right, I'm sorry, I
This
just
is
thought
just
it was
proving the
a
point that we
simple
need to have that
one.
conversation.
Wow, really?
That's why I mentioned that, because there's no answers yet, but it's starting to get rolling right now,
And
CAPCOA
obviously,
has some big concerns.
we have work groups and for facility-based measures, we have work group for reclaim, right?
We have an interagency work group for that.
Yeah, do we need to bring those issues here for special conversation at home rule, or should we leave that up to the work group process?
Well, there is no public working group for that yet, so there is, and maybe it does get deferred to that.
For which one?
For like the emissions reporting and
Oh, for
ABC.
emission reduction. No, I'm talking about reclaim and
Oh, there's
facility-based measures.
other issues, okay.
I'm thinking of big issues that are going to come up over the course of this year.
Well, from facility-based measures, I mean, I know the district has a number of rules, but then we have CARB that's looking at their ISRs or
Yeah,
whatever.
so maybe it is a home rule
And then we
topic.
have other Caltrans or, I mean, there's a lot of
Okay.
stuff with those freight plans and everything that, I mean, maybe even if it's not a standing thing, maybe we could have
Yeah, we do
at least something where
plan
some
on
of those
having it on
agencies
agenda.
update us on what.
We have 5 more meetings this year, so you know, that's probably a good idea.
Definitely after March.
Maybe, yeah, sometime after March. Right. Okay,
Reclaim, I don't necessarily think we have to.
yeah, because that'll be dealt with the
Rehash.
stationary source, the work groups, and yeah, we'll be reliving that nightmare many times over.
As many times as I.
You get paid for it. Let's see. What other topics might jump out? Are there things on new technologies or technology development or incentive money or anything like that people are interested in having a deeper dive conversation about?
One item, not necessarily on that subject, but I don't see covered by any other group that I'm getting more questions from my wastewater group, is enforcement. You see there's a couple rules coming up as far as consistency with federal requirements, what we're doing locally, the interpretation of enforcement. I've been getting some, inconsistent feedback from enforcement that may be helpful, just to clarify what the rules are and where we're going with them.
Yeah, we don't really have that general conversation about enforcement issues anywhere else.
Cheryl was very good when she was here about briefing us at least once a year, if not twice.
Yeah.
On
We
that.
can bring Bay in and have them do that, right?
If you have specific rules or federal regs that are coming up, that would help us focus.
I do have a request, that's been quite a while, and I haven't heard back from Bay, so it's one reason I'm bringing it up. I do have a list of questions. One example is, I received just a trivial little thing at one of our sites, and normally it would just be, hey, take care of this, no problem, which is we take care of it the next day. And a couple weeks later, we get an NOV. I'm like, well, that's strange, we fixed it the day you told us there's a concern. And the response we got was, since you're a Title V facility, we don't have the discretion to give a notice to comply, we have to give an NOV, which is inconsistent with practice. And I actually talked to the prosecutor's office, and they said, we've never heard of that. So that's an example of.
There's been some arguments along that line. I'd love to have that conversation about Title V and enforcement issues. And,
I can come up with some others, but that's one example.
And I would be interested too in getting an update, I guess, from maybe Matt's group on these portable sensors.
Okay. Sure.
Dr. Rue, maybe I'm not paying attention, but it's been a while since I've seen some fresh data on charging station activity. I remember when we first discussed the advent and the growth of electric vehicles, it just seems like everybody got on board, and maybe I'm not paying attention.
Maybe we should broaden that just to clean technology or alternative technology infrastructure.
Yeah.
That would be fair, as long as we can include that component. I'd like to see where and maybe your group, the small business guys, are at in their implementation of that in their businesses going
Yeah,
forward.
and how much of it needs to be subsidized, how much would
That's
take care of itself.
that's the questions that I would
and all
have, and love
Yeah.
to get some of those answers.
That's a great topic because it involves PUC and CEC and other agencies
My
that don't.
Sioma people, independent oil marketers, you know, that have gas stations, or
Right,
or maybe
some of them are
charging
now
stations.
thinking, yeah, exactly. And I know that on the Trillium, one of the natural gas fuel providers is now saying, you know, hey, we're open to putting in charging, we're open to putting in hydrogen, you know, whatever we can do, we'll do it at our stations. So there are some developments going on there. It's a great
Let
topic.
me throw just an anecdotal. I family business is a little hotel, a little resort hotel we run. We have an extra parking spot in what's required, and it just sits blank all the time. We would be very interested in seeing what can we do as a local community business to make sure that that spot's being used for something that's important. So that's kind of what's driving it also, but I'd like to see where the industry is going. And I think you're right, Phil, it does bring in so many agencies as a component of that. So.
Great, so we have 5 topics.
Well, maybe 617 will be recurring.
Well, 617 is recurring, but yeah.
The only other thing that you had mentioned prior to this meeting is, you know, kind of the initiatives that are being taken by cities and counties, or departments in cities and counties, directed by their respective boards or councils.
So local government
to do
efforts,
to do things similar to what we're doing, say in Paramount, and then those efforts turn into a lot of meetings and documents that are essentially just regurgitating stuff that we have done.
And LA County is now going to have, I guess, their lawyers report back to them what LA County Public Health can do above and beyond, right?
Right. And then, so LA City is also has this initiative that the sanitation district is, Chris Flake is leading. There's some meetings on that. So I don't know if that's a topic, but it does seem like there's.
I think so. I think it's a good home rule topic. I can't think of, well, I mean, maybe it's discussed at local government and small business assistance, but I think it'd be good for us to pick up on.
Because the idea is, it's great that they're getting involved, but how can they complement what we're doing and not just overlap? Because some of the efforts have just been, well, they just talk about our rules, they talk about our enforcement, they talk about our efforts, and then they talk about everything we're doing. Sometimes we're there to talk about it, sometimes we're not, but then there's nothing beyond that. And then, so what's the real point? But maybe there are some things that can go beyond it to help us.
And there are legal issues, there are practical issues, or policy issues, there's a lot of things. Okay.
So, I don't know what to call that, kind of like
local government, I don't know.
Toxic initiatives or something like that.
Yeah, or local government, I don't know, initiatives. Maybe. Yeah, not only toxic. I mean, you look at the Clean Air Action Plan at the ports, right? That is falls within there, and they deal with criteria pollutants. And at this time, they actually set goals for greenhouse gas reductions. So they're taking on everything. Anyone else have any great ideas? If not, we've got 1 standing topic and 5 other ones. Until you can figure out what the timing is for.
We'll check in with you.
Yeah, what works for everybody. Bring other staff people in. I'm really excited about the enforcement one. I hadn't thought about that. It's great. Okay. Any questions, comments? We will consider the accomplishments and goals and objectives approved, send those off to Stationary Source Committee and to the Governing Board. We will schedule deep dives on these 5 topics. Facility-based measures, enforcement, local government initiatives, sensors, alternative technology infrastructure, and then have a standing item on 617. Great. Pretty productive of us for so early in the year. Okay. Do we have any other business under item 10? Now's your chance to redress your government for grievances under public comment on item 11. Hearing none, we will adjourn until March 14th. And another update. We managed to make it to almost 11:30. We've got the food here. And for you folks who don't come here to Stationary Source, to Home Rule Advisory Committee, we are going to now eat our steak and lobster and shrimp. that we have served by the 4-star restaurant down the street every month. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, and we're
Thank you,
adjourned. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.